Hello, everyone, and welcome to Whale Project Showcase. Today, we're featuring Freeport, a platform uniquely positioned to bridge Trad Art and Web3 by bringing legendary physical fine art to the market as fractionalized on-chain shares backed by physical assets, allowing everyone an opportunity to own some of the most revered physical art in the world. I'm joined today by co-founder and CEO Colin Johnson. Colin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Nightmare, thanks for having me. Can I just quickly say, I would listen to that intro for like hours on end. That is a dope intro.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate that. I run off the cuff, so sometimes it works. Sometimes, I go back to the drawing board. But with you guys, it's easy. Very interesting and very intriguing what you guys are putting together. So again,
I was talking about the music.
Sheesh.
No, not us. We're cool too.
Yeah, but full disclosure, I did put that intro together myself as well. So I'll take the props on that one.
Yeah.
Before we hop into it, my understanding, you may need to throw out a disclaimer of some sorts. Is that the case?
Yeah. So because we went the super legit route with what we're doing here, and we got SEC and FINRA approval. So because of that, there's just a really quick disclosure because we're live today. People can visit freeport.app to check out the offering circular for the things that we're going to be chatting about today for the fine art shares. So that's it. Pretty simple one.
Well, I appreciate that, and we don't often have to say that. So interesting indeed. I know a lot of times we hear some of those things and run the other direction, but I appreciate you being bold, forging new grounds for us in this space. Sounds like you got a little. Are you at a meeting spot? There seems to be some other people talking in the background as well.
Oh yeah, there are actually. Let me change my mic to my headphones here. That will probably be ideal. But yeah, there's good reason for that. We're here in New York City. And we're actually going to throw our launch event in 2 days. So we got the whole team here at an Airbnb. We're all just getting pumped up. We're watching the pre-sales kind of start to happen today. So we're all here and really, really amped. So, but let me know if it's too loud.
Yeah, no, that's super dope. I understand you guys were kind of aggregating together as things were going to come to launch here in the coming days. So I just thought it was exciting that you all would be together working on things now, including this interview, and we're catching you live in the moment. So before we hop into it and talk more about Freeport, can you give me a brief background on yourself?
Yeah, sure. So as you mentioned before, my name is Colin Johnson. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO here at Freeport. There goes Jeff, my CFO or COO, excuse me, in the backgrounds. But yeah, on me, I was at Apple for 5 years before doing this. So I was on the Apple Pay team. I managed marketing for Apple Cash. I tried to convince them to get into crypto. I actually wrote a white paper when I was at Apple talking about the 7 different things we should do in wallet to get into the crypto space. Got put on a research group, but we never actually did those things. As you might imagine, it's a little harder to convince them to do the things that
just stuff in the Bitcoin white paper and the iOS.
That wasn't me. Plausible deniability. So I was at Apple for a while doing the marketing thing for Apple Cash, and before that, I was at American Express on the digital partnerships and development team there. So we partnered with like Uber and Airbnb. And a bunch of other players that were trying to be cool again. And Amex was trying to be cool to young folks again. So I led up a lot of those marketing partnerships. So I've kind of been in payments for a long time. I've been into crypto for a very long time now. I started buying Bitcoin way back in the day, probably like 2014, I want to say, and ETH not too long after that, after reading those white papers. So I've been a background diehard Web3 person who happens to have gone through the kind of tech legacy financial world and then decided, you know what, it's time to go full bore in Web3 about a year ago.
Very cool. A lot of credentialed, I'm sure, roles there that gave you great insight into how to best leverage this technology. How about from the art side? Were you an art collector yourself or around art and that kind of keyed up your interest?
Yeah, growing up, I've been around art a lot. We've got a close family friend. He's actually one of our advisors now, who's been a Warhol dealer in New York City. He actually got me my first puppy way back in the day. So I've been experiencing kind of that art world through his lens. I've been talking about Warhol since many, many years ago, I guess you could say. But I'm getting more and more familiar with them these days. I've had to hone my expertise a little bit more than just saying, oh, hey, that looks cool. So yeah, that's been my background in art.
Very cool. And having that kind of an intimate connection, I think, is definitely a unique opportunity to be able to tap someone and say, hey, what are your thoughts on this live versus just, having had exposure and, what you would have done just off the cuff and what your interests were. Talk to me about Freeport. Give us a synopsis of what it is, and we can break it down a little bit more from there.
Yeah. So basically, we're a platform that lets people invest in fine art that they normally would never be able to afford, right? So if you look at the fine art market and how it's performed, we're talking physical fine art here, not NFTs, but we can definitely get into NFTs later too, because they do play a role in our platform. We do let people display them, but what we're doing is we're fractionalizing real physical pieces of fine art, right? And expensive pieces, not sort of like $100 or $300 pieces, but multi-$100,000 pieces, and we'll likely move into $1,000,000+ pieces in the future. The first collection that we're looking at here, they're within the range of like 200K to 800K. But basically, we want to take this art that historically has performed really well as a financial asset. Like it's outperformed the S&P 500 when you look at blue chip art specifically over the past like 22 years. And we want to give people access to that potential financial growth, right? So historically, you would have had to pay a few $100,000 or $1,000,000 to be able to get any part of that growth. And what we're doing is saying, well, that's kind of bullshit. How can we democratize this, right? And blockchain allows for tokenization. It allows for community ownership. And we thought, all right, there's the potential to put these two things together so that we can democratize access to this asset class that historically has just been kind of reserved for uber billionaires. And that's the financial side of it. But then we also wanted to make it fun and cool, right? So like a lot of us are Web3 enthusiasts who are on the team here. We bought a bunch of NFTs. We've engaged with all the DeFi protocols. And we realized that there's added utility to having ownership be tokenized, right? So we said, all right, well, we can do the one thing. We can take the fine art. We can fractionalize it. We can do that off chain. But then what if we put those tokens on chain and then started to build out this virtual world where, you can imagine if NFTs were actually backed by something physical, like that's kind of what we're trying to get at. So there are still community elements of ownership. There's this idea of a group of individuals coming together to purchase something, but then it's actually backed by a physical piece of fine art, and especially a blue chip physical piece of fine art. So that it has a very strong sort of history in regards to price appreciation. To be clear, we can't guarantee any price appreciation in the future. That's one of the things when you go through the SEC, you're limited on what you can say. But what we can say is if you look historically at how art has done, especially top tier art, it's done pretty well. So we're trying to bring that to everyone, right? And not just the sort of uber elites who have $1 million+ to spend on art, although we don't mind them on our platform either.
I mean, that's dope. One of the things that we always champion about what the NFT space and what Web3 culture has provided is a democratization of art and the accessibility for people across different geographic regions or socioeconomic statuses. A lot of the gatekeeping relative to who could collect what, which is very prevalent in trad art. Actually, when it comes to some of these blue chip collections, it can be circumvented to a degree, right? You still need to have the resources, you need to have the technology and the technical capabilities to do so. So that's something that's really near and dear to the heart of a lot of Web3 enthusiasts. You mentioned the democratization of art being, a key propeller for you guys to move this forward. Was there another impetus for this? Was there some other inspo besides just, hey, we think more people should have access? Is that something that you are strong advocates of from an accessibility standpoint, or did someone have a challenge for it? Just wondering if there's a bigger inspo there.
Yeah, so I personally have a few bigger inspos there. So fine art is this incredible asset class. You go to the museum and you kind of look at what's hanging up on the wall and you think like, oh, I could never own part of that. Like it's literally for a different class of people than myself. And we think that that's nonsense. And we just want to break down those barriers and allow there to effectively be museums where people own it instead of just like uber billionaires who are putting it out on loan, I guess, let's just say. So that's the one piece. And we sort of touched on that. But the other one is, I just think that more value should exist on blockchains, right? So like humans are more efficient when there's more value on a blockchain because you can do things like easily swap them. You can stake one form of value and sort of take out another form of value. The more that we move human value onto the blockchain, the more that humans are going to be efficient and the more we're going to push for a more sort of democratized monetary system. So not only is the art piece important so we can give that to sort of consumers, but then we can also bring value onto blockchains, right? And we're going to be using Ethereum to start. And I'm, a pretty diehard Ethereum fanatic myself. But we think it's just fundamentally better for humanity to have value stored on chain. It's got more utility. It can then interact with all the other platforms that want to sort of recognize that form of value. So that's a really primary driver for us as well, is just bringing blockchain to the forefront of all that we do. And we think this is a really good use case for it. It's not just like a nonsense use case for it.
Fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. I think we all can relate to that environment, whether it be, getting a certain good at some point, whether it's, from a handbag to a watch to, a piece of fine art. Having that judgment and having to go through those barriers is certainly something that no one wants to encounter. Another question for you from the community that I'm getting is just from a process perspective, trying to understand the dynamic here. My understanding is the pieces, you guys procure them. It's fractionalized. They're set, quantities, etc. You essentially allow people to buy in for shares of those. Once you've reached the total for the goal for the artwork, then it's the ownership's fractionalized and dispersed. You have a set target for a time frame for when you would return to market, and you have analysts that watch that. And ultimately, the goal is to bring it back to market and have returns for the holders. Is that correct?
Yeah, 100%. That last point is extremely pertinent to us. Like having the secondary moment of commerce is hugely important. If people think about like particle collection as an example, where they took a piece of art, they fractionalized it, but then they like gave the art to a nonprofit, and then people were just kind of trading the fractions, but there's no secondary moment of commerce potential for the artwork. That is like the opposite of what we're looking to do. So let me just walk through the steps here, I guess, to simplify it for people. So we take a fine piece of art. Let's say we've got the Marilyn. We have this hot pink Marilyn. She's like the most iconic Warhol of all time, right? There she is right there. So that's going to be one of our pieces. We sign a contract with the folks that we're procuring the artwork from that says, hey, we're going to purchase this Marilyn once we go through this initial fundraising round effectively through something that's called Reg A, which is like a really, really lightweight way of fundraising legally through the SEC. But we take the painting, we sign that contract, and then we raise the funds, which is what we're doing right now so that people can all sort of invest together. But we give that piece to a Series LLC. A Series LLC is just a super lightweight organization that you can issue shares in effectively. It doesn't do anything other than act as a container for people to own a piece of their one asset. And the one asset in this case is Maryland, right? So then we issue shares in that sort of LLC that has one asset, which is Maryland. And those shares are, the things that people are purchasing currently. Once we sell out the full asset, that's when we actually distribute the shares. We don't distribute them until, the full amount has been invested in. If it isn't fully invested in, then we return the funds immediately to the investors. We're pretty confident with our first collection that it's going to be sold out because these are like some of the coolest Warhols of all time. So as soon as the initial collection sells out, we distribute the shares to people, and they're going to be tokenized on Ethereum, to be clear here, right? So if people want, after these things close out, we're going to allow folks to withdraw the tokens into their wallet, which is pretty sweet and unique. But then people will hold these shares. We've already signed the contracts for our secondary market. So we need an ATS and a broker dealer. Those contracts are signed. We're going to be building that market out. Like we're starting to get into that build right now, and probably 2 or 3 months after launch, we'll have that secondary market for trading. Although, the timing is TBD on exactly when our partners will be able to do that. But people will be able to sell their shares on the secondary market on Freeport. But then if they just continue holding, so here's to get to that secondary moment of commerce question. We're also going to allow other folks to come in and make bids on the full pieces of art. So like we've got these personal galleries that people have. We'll have a Freeport gallery where all of the pieces that have been invested in on Freeport will be displayed. And like if Nightmare decided, okay, I just made $1.5 million on Pepe coin or something like that, right? You could pop in and say, well, now I want to actually own a physical Maryland. So let's say we sell the Maryland for, I think it's $550,000, the total costs of the piece right now. And then someone comes in and says, you know what, I just crushed it on X, Y, or Z. I want to offer you all $750,000 for the Maryland. Then we'll pause trading at that point in time. We'll assess the offer. We'll make sure the person is legit. And then we'll accept the offer and distribute the proceeds and the relevant profits to the people proportionally to the shares that they own. So we care a lot about having that secondary moment of commerce because we don't want it to just be like shares that people trade back and forth. We want to actually get to the point of getting returns to our customers. In some cases, that might take a few years, which I know sounds like a really long time. But in some cases, it might be really, really short. Also, part of the reason that we chose Warhols, and specifically the most iconic Warhols ever, is because there's much more liquidity. There's much more demand for these, right? Versus some like $15 million, incredibly hard to sort of find a buyer for a piece of art. Warhols have a lot of buying and selling activity. So we're hopeful that we can move these things relatively quickly, depending on how the.
Colin, you still with us?
Yeah. Sorry, did I cut out there?
No. You got it. You had a little bit of a roboting for me, but we could hear you fine, and you're still fine now. So, you wanted to move through you're hopeful that people will be able to see the secondary market move quickly, and you'll continue to bring other pieces, I assume, to the market.
Yeah. No, this is the pilot collection, right? The goal is for Freeport to be this massive location where people can buy and sell different assets of all types. We're going to be focused on fine art to start because we have incredible advisors and people that are able to procure really quality art for us to start. But you can imagine in the future, Freeport just being the central home base for buying fractional assets of all different types and sorts. That have been securitized legally. So you know that these are like legit things and it's going to be here in the US, not internationally, but also that have been tokenized. So we're preparing ourselves for sort of the next generation of ownership and to sort of engage with the utility that blockchain allows for by starting with these tokenized assets.
Very cool. So my understanding, there's going to be a proprietary marketplace, obviously, right, within the regulatory framework and what you guys have to do to be, tokenized securities. You have to contain that within your environment, right? It can't just be free traded outside of it.
Yeah. So my dream, we could talk about my dream. My dream is that you could just trade these things on Uniswap or SushiSwap, right? And like that's the end goal. We're not there yet from a regulatory perspective, right? So you will have to buy and sell on Freeport, and that's because we need to have an SEC registered broker dealer and ATS alternative trading system kind of monitor those trades. So to start, it will be on Freeport, but the type of technology we're using, the tokens that we're using, will allow us to alter a little bit of the code and to let them trade on Uniswap or SushiSwap as soon as regulation allows for that, right? So it's not us that's holding up the train there. I would love to be able to just have these things be sort of universally swapped. But because we need to know sort of who the buyer and the seller is from a securities law perspective, right now the purchases have to happen on Freeport, the secondary.
Yeah, I like the foresight for that. Reminds me of my trips to some different places in the world where things like drinking is illegal. Yet there's these juice bars that are set up with the amazing geography and prime real estate, ready to flip the switch should things happen. Right? They're ready with the real estate and they're ready to go, locked and loaded.
And that's what we need to do. By the way, like we need to guide the SEC towards the light a little bit. Like what we're trying to do is merge the two worlds of like having fun and sort of like the social engagement of crypto with what we expect to be the legal and enforcement actions, so that like our customers don't have to worry if at some point our tokens are just going to blow up or the government's going to say, you can't do that anymore. So we decided, all right, we're going to go with the regulatory route, but we also want to have fun and utilize blockchain in a real way. So like, how can we start like, bringing the horse to water a little bit with the SEC? And I say that in a fond way. As fond a way as I can, because we think that that's a responsibility of ours, is to show, okay, this is what the future might look like if we decide to engage with these types of organizations. And like, can we show them that they're responsible stewards in the Web3 space of these types of activities?
Yeah, it's fascinating. Speaking of, the regulatory framework and the dynamic that you have at play there, it's unique where you've kind of hung the carrot out to both sides, in my opinion, right? You guys do a great job of your communication efforts and what you're doing and where you're kind of forging pathways in both directions. I'd love to dig into that a little bit from a marketing perspective in a moment, but you brought up the regulatory framework. Talk to me a little bit about that. Talk us through some of the wins that you've gotten and getting support and getting the SEC on board with what you're doing, as well as some of the challenges that you've seen.
Yeah, it's not. I'll start with this. It's not easy, and I wouldn't recommend it for every Web3 project, right? But there are some where it absolutely makes sense. For us, we have physical assets, right? So, like at some point in time, someone's going to need to confirm that those assets exist and that the people who are maintaining them are real people, and that like the Freeport staff are not snake oil salesmen just saying, "Yes, I have this fine art." So, from our perspective, we knew that we were going to have to go through the SEC because it's a legitimizer to our customers, right? When they see us bringing valuable physical assets on chain, they want to know that there's been some sort of check or balance there. So we thought that was absolutely a necessity, and we made the decision about 12 months ago now that we were going to go this route. And then it took roughly 9 months to get the approval. To be clear, it actually, once we got to the SEC, it only took about 3 months, maybe a little bit over 3 months. But there were 6 months of preparation to get all the like organizational structures in place, the operating agreements to ensure that the rights that like the token holders had were accurate, so that when we got to the SEC, they would say, okay, this all looks legit, right? Like these people are doing it in the proper way. There are some painful elements to going this route, like that you're limited in what you can say. You have to add disclosures to a lot of things, like the disclosure that I mentioned earlier, saying, view the offering circular at freeport.app. And there are obviously expenses that go along with it also, especially these upfront sort of legal expenses. But we expect those to ameliorate over time, right? Like those expenses will obviously go down as more and more people move into the space. And they already have for us, frankly. Like every additional offering is going to be far more efficient. So at the end of the day, it was really important for us. We saw all these enforcement actions happen. And so you might see a few team members just walking behind me because we're just getting ready.
Love it.
Like it's launch week. Anyways, so we saw all these enforcement actions and we were like, well, we don't want to create something with this incredible fine art and go through all of this work and decide like, hey, we'll live in a legal gray zone and then get enforced upon in the future, right? It's like, it's not the right thing for our customers. It's not the approach that we wanted to take. So we said, all right, we'll just do the annoying thing. We'll take the year out of our lives to ensure that everyone is on board with our approach here. And now that we're on the other side of that, we're really, really happy that we did that. But it's hard to say at the beginning, like, oh yeah, I'll just take a year to go through this process instead of just like build and execute and deliver to customers. But now we're excited to be able to deliver today.
Yeah, that's dope, and a lot of people are appreciating the fact that you're trying to forward thinking here and trying to lay the groundwork for things to come. You mentioned, obviously having the physical goods, and that's a unique aspect of what you're doing. Could this framework that you're establishing work for digital goods in the future for you guys as well, or does it has to include a physical, tangible product?
Yeah, definitely could. So Reg A basically allows, the way that this works, I won't get too technical with it, but basically like you create this LLC or this organization, and then you can give that organization whatever asset you want. So you could give it, $100,000 Fidenza if that's what you wanted to do, right? And then you're issuing shares in that organization. It's really just a container, right? The organization, but then you can issue shares in it, and that lets you all collectively own something together in a way that's kind of legally recognized. So you could do that with any kind of digital asset that you want. And then the really nice thing about Reg A is people don't have to be accredited investors to buy these shares either, right? So like you don't have to be making over 200K a year. You don't need to have $1 million worth of assets. Anyone can purchase them. So yeah, any asset, literally any asset that we think is worth fractionalizing, we absolutely can. And then we can, tokenize that and allow people to purchase those tokens.
Very cool. A lot of people are excited about this. Do you think you guys have a role to play from an advocacy perspective, kind of evangelizing Web3 to the SEC and then vice versa, saying that, hey, these guys this isn't the big bad wolf over here. We can all play nice.
Yeah, that's my dream. I mean, I want to, in some ways, rest on my credentials a little bit, or let my credentials speak on that behalf. Like I did the Amex thing, I did the Apple thing, but in the background, I was like Web3, right? So you can imagine my goal and sort of my dream long term is to make these two worlds talk to each other so that we can have the most effective blockchain, which I think requires having as much value as possible on the blockchain. So we want to come in and fill that role of people that are advocates of the fun parts of blockchain and the utility of blockchain and the social elements of blockchain and defend that. But we also recognize that there are going to be players that get really pissed off if they're not involved. And we want to try to lead them in the right direction rather than just sort of be abrasive towards them, because we think there's going to be a much stronger response over the next few years to people that are kind of abrasive towards them. And to be clear, I don't think everyone should do what we're doing. I think there are a lot of elements and a lot of things that are decentralized that are not securities. A lot of things are just art that's on chain, as an example, when it comes to NFTs. A lot of communities are not passing what's called the Howey test and sort of, looking to derive profits necessarily outwardly for the community members. So like we're in a specific niche of bringing real world assets on chain. And we think we're going to do everything that we can to make that a more palatable future for the SEC, but also for like the blockchain world. So yeah, we hope to be those advocates.
Yeah, I can tell by the passion in which you talk about it, right? That being on chain is important to you beyond the technical capabilities that it provides for the platform. I think
Yeah,
you
dude,
you
people are
talk
just so
about
much better.
from a
Like
humanity
these communities.
perspective.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, that authenticity matters, right? There's a lot of Web2 companies trying to just leverage, the liquidity in Web3 and the accessibility and having genuine connections here. You talk about community. You've referenced Pepe, obviously, something that's been everywhere over the past 2 weeks, right? So, like, you guys are definitely tied in and not like a trad art world trying to Trojan horse their way
Not
into
that I want to
Web3.
associate us with Pepe too much, to be clear, but yeah, 100%.
Understood, but like you guys are actually here with you're
Yeah,
in this world, right? You're in this world as well, and not someone just trying to take something that's brick and mortar and toss it into Web3 and see what
yeah.
sticks,
You should see
which
my
we've
Discord
seen.
channels.
Yeah, no, I can only imagine. I can only imagine, especially over the past 2 weeks. You're talking about DeFi and being really into the weeds there. Um, you talk about physical goods. I'd love to talk about your procurement process and the people that you have involved there. But before we get to that, talk to me a little bit about your team that you had put together. Obviously, you have an incredible background yourself. You have some interesting people that are listed on your website as well as being part of the team. Just wanted to know if you could touch on your co-founders and the other people working with you.
Yeah, so our co-founders, we bring a diverse set of, like, as I mentioned, we're merging these two worlds, right? So you need a diverse set of skills in order to merge those two worlds. So we can start with, I met our CTO David Lumley out in San Francisco. I was working at Apple. He was working at a company called Clearbit, which is like a huge sort of like data processing house. They work with all the big tech companies out there. Absolute badass engineer, can solve any problem at any point in time. I did work with this group called Angel Protocol, which is on the Terra blockchain, RIP. That for philanthropic efforts, and we ran this campaign together where we raised like $1.5 million to combat climate change over the period of 1 month, which is pretty epic for 3 different charities. But I convinced him to do that from his Web2 world to come into Web3 and like play around a little bit with it. And after that campaign, he was like, "All right, you know what? This is kind of cool. Like, I'm going to get into this. Like, Colin, what should we do?" Kind of thing. So we got him on board from a super strong engineering, kind of like Silicon Valley perspective. And then we have Jeff, who used to be at Penn Interactive, which is like online gaming, sports betting, like that kind of a thing. So he is steeped in regulatory knowledge, right? He's dealt with a lot of the stuff that we have to deal with on the SEC front. And he's been like super, super useful in navigating that front. So we've had to sort of merge those two worlds. And then you have myself and Max. Again, you know my background. We've kind of talked about that. I've also just been into crypto for a long time. Max, when he was like 13 years old, had 0.5% of the entire Bitcoin hash rate. So like he's got a depth of knowledge in the Web3 space and sort of a depth of experience in the Web3 space that's kind of insane. He's in his early 20s, but like he's been in it to win it for quite some time. And then obviously we've got Sydney, who joined over the summer, who's just been absolutely crushing it out of Babson. She's like a Web3 convert, I would say. So she's picked it up very quickly, and she's now like converting all of her friends. We also have a few engineers that aren't listed on the site here, one of whom I actually found on Farcaster. I don't know if you're familiar with Farcaster. It's like the decentralized social app. I spend a lot more time there than I spend on Twitter. So we found one of our engineers there, like one of our top engineers we found on Farcaster. So he's like a Web3 diehard also. We built a bot together for Farcaster. So like we've got a team with this diverse set of skills with a backbone that's like very respectful of what Web3 means and what decentralization is, but also a recognition of what sort of the standard legacy world is going to mandate and require out of us.
That's dope. And yes, we are familiar with Farcaster. We're big advocates here of decentralized social media. You can catch us on Diamond App, on DeSo, as well as Lens. And I think people are popping up on Blue Sky. We're all over it. So we'll look for you on Farcaster as well. From a procurement perspective, I know you guys are probably actively planning, release schedule over the next year or so and what you're going to do. You talked about your connection with a childhood family friend, it sounded like, who got you into the war halls. Is that your one of your resources? Do you guys have a team? How are you going about doing that?
Yeah, so we've got multiple advisors. We've got him. We have another woman, Raina, who is a curator at the Pace Gallery here in New York City. So Pace is doing the Pace Verso stuff, a lot of Web3 NFT crossover. Like I went to a Tyler Hobbs Fidenza showing there, actually, I guess a couple of months ago now. But we have her on the team. And then we have this woman, Jane Holzer, who used to be a Warhol superstar when she was younger. So she's 81. She's incredible. She's 81 years old now, which is amazing that she's in the Web3 space, but she like gets it. But she used to be a Warhol superstar. She hung out with Andy Warhol. She has Warhols of herself in her house, on like above her staircase when she walks up to bed every night. She has like multi-million-dollar Warhols of herself. She is just like absolutely like a killer when it comes to the art collecting world, and has all of the connections. She's like the matriarch of Warhols in New York City. So she's an advisor and investor and helping us procure artwork as well. So between them, we have way more access than we have any right to have to fine art, especially pop art and sort of contemporary art. And we've already had people reach out to us too. So like, we should talk about that. Someone in the UK with a Banksy reached out a couple of months ago, the Valentine's Day Banksy, and asked us if we could tokenize that for them. We spoke with some folks at Playboy a while back who have a bunch of their own artwork, not nude artwork, but like their own Warhols and things of that sort that they would like to tokenize so that they can put it on blockchain and then do fun things with it. So in addition to having the kind of sources that we already have through our close advisors, we also have an incredible amount of inbound, because you think about these Web2 companies that have a lot of assets but don't have a Web3 strategy. And then you look at the landscape of like, all right, well, how do I get into Web3? It's sort of, do I do loyalty tokens or like gaming, or is it just some kind of partnership with a Web3 company like Nike and Artifact, right? Or something like that. But then you look at what Freeport does, and we're actually tokenizing real world assets and then putting them on chain. So if you're a Web2 company and you have a bunch of cool assets, or if you just have a bunch of art and you want to get involved in Web3, well, we have created the process that lets you take that asset, fractionalize it, let a bunch of people invest in it, and have those investments be tokenized. So we think we're going to have a lot of inbound from folks that want to get involved in Web3 that have those assets, because we've done the hard legwork to get to a real point of allowing people to invest fractionally in those things. So it's kind of crazy that we haven't launched anything and we've had inbound requests to sell to fractionalize people's art. And sorry, we have launched as of today.
That's dope. Congratulations. Wow. Exciting stuff. And it's very intriguing to wrap my head around. It's just a lot of people don't come from this angle and this perspective. So you have a unique vantage point from where you are in the space, given what sounds like some serendipitous coming together of people and kind of knowledges and specialties here. Talk to me about the metaverse component, because I found that very compelling in what you guys are building here with Freeport and the galleries and how those are going to be used.
Yeah. So when it comes to art, this will be relevant to all your listeners, I think, but like there's some studies that have been done, and like 5 to 10% of people invest in art just because of the financial returns, right? Something like 15% of people buy art just because they like the aesthetics, or they like the social elements, and then they like engaging with other people as collectors. And then the rest, like 80% of people or something to that effect, want both, right? They want the financial returns, and they want the sort of visual and the social engagement that comes with being a collector, the ability to tell other people that you own something and to show it off. People like to flex, right? So what we did is we decided to build this virtual gallery so that people can come hang all their favorite NFTs. By the way, you can connect your wallet right now, hang all your NFTs, and it's a super high fidelity gallery. Like, we got one of the best 3JS designers in the world to make this custom for us. It's not like spatial or on cyber or anything like that. Like, there's crazy God rays and reflections on the floor and all kinds of things going on in the gallery here. But people can come, they can connect their wallets, display their NFTs, and then as they collect pieces on Freeport or shares of pieces, they can hang that art in here too, right? And if you click on one of the pieces here, this is like a sample gallery with photography in it. You can see that there are views and likes. So people are going to be able to come in and like and view other pieces of artwork and then comment on it as well. So we want this to be a social space where people can display the artwork that they have sort of purchased fractions of or invested in shares of, rather, and then continue building on this, right? So that we have that social element, so that people can actually take that part of art collecting that otherwise wouldn't be available and bring it to life in this virtual space. Now, this is our space. When you talk metaverse, there's also Sandbox and there's Decentraland, right? And like, they're not too hot right now. I think they've got like 40 people a day or something going through them. But in the future, you can imagine experiences that are super compelling when we're in an up market. And let's say someone wants to create, if you're Playboy, as an example, a Playboy mansion in the Sandbox, and you only want to let people into the VIP room of the Playboy mansion if they own shares in one of your pieces of artwork, right? So like, our platform lets people legally tokenize those assets, and then they can create other experiences on the blockchain or in the metaverse that are based upon people owning the assets that have been tokenized legally on Freeport. So it's like it's opening up this whole connectivity, this connected world between physical and digital, and having real sort of investment assets displayed in the metaverse. That I think is the future, right? I think it's going to make the metaverse come to life a lot more when there are real sort of hard assets that are being displayed there.
Wow. So access and, access tokens essentially granted by partial ownership of a physical good in a digital format could open up digital experiences, and in turn I'm sure that could loop back around. So that's very interesting. I like how there's a leaderboard down here for some additional gamification. And I think in our previous conversations there's possibly some different ways that people could accumulate points over time and do some different interesting things, right?
Yeah, for sure. So right now it's we made our own sort of proprietary algorithm, and it's just based upon the NFTs in someone's wallet, their rarity, and the sort of the number of them. Over time, we'll be implementing let's say you buy 3 of the 4 Warhols that we have available, shares in 3 of the 4 Warhols that we have available. We can give you more points for owning more sort of shares in that collection. And over time, people can start building up these fine art collections and have a sort of legitimate representation of their overall collection. And we're going to merge the worlds of NFT and physical art as well in these collections and start to do really fun things. Because again, we care about like the fun part of blockchain, right? So there's obviously the financial element. People want to buy art because art historically has performed really well, like outperformed the S&P 500 for the past 23 years. But then also like engage with it. So we're thinking, all right, well, like what are the most fun ways we can allow people to engage with the things that they're investing in? And leaderboards are fun. Stats are fun, right? So that's going to be a key, especially as we start introducing more artwork onto the platform. That's going to be a key element, is kind of the gamification and the social.
Yeah, and I love the idea of having my X copy hung next to a Warhol, or however I want to make it. Maybe a Basquiat would be better there. That being said, yeah, very interesting, especially when you talk about the capability to take what you're doing and actually extrapolate that into other environments as well. This doesn't just have to live in house, right? The fact that it's going to be on chain could mean there's a lot of interesting things that could be done, even in crypto voxels, right? Even to in whatever environment. So that's super intriguing.
Yep.
You talk about obviously the metaverse component being something that you want to drive for community, and and just having some additional fun and leveraging why people enjoy art beyond just the monetary gain. And I definitely appreciate that. I think in a lot of your communication as well, I found it interesting from a marketing perspective that you seem to be talking to both people that would be a little bit hesitant into what they understand blockchain to be, and tokenization of art, almost kind of leaning into the narratives and into some of the negatives, like, hey, if you're hesitant because of X, Y, and Z, well, here's how we're doing it. And you're doing it in such a way, I'm going to try to pull up some examples here, but with memetics, right? You're leaning into the memes that are current in Web3 culture.
Yeah.
And by the same token, talking to that audience about how you can get access to the physical goods. I just found that straddling the line to be unique from a marketing perspective. Was that something that you set out to do and were cognizant of?
Yeah, again, we're trying to merge these two worlds, which can be risky, right? Like as a startup, generally you want to like find just your little niche. You want to put all of your resources into your little niche, and that's sort of like you just keep sort of building out from there. From our perspective, we really wanted to build something new, and that means that we had to kind of live in a space that's not one that's been explored really heavily before, right? Where we take advantage. Like, we love memes. Memes are hilarious. Like, they get a point across really quickly, and people can sort of understand rapidly like what these people are about, right? Yeah, you can see a few of the examples here. But we also recognize that, like, look, there are probably like 100,000, 200,000 really active people in the crypto space right now in the bear market, and then that number like super inflates when it's a bull market. That's not a lot of people, and we need to get other people into the crypto space. So we need to be able to speak the language of, hey, you're investing in this thing. It's fine art. You get to engage with it in a virtual gallery. To them, it doesn't matter that on the back end, there are tokens that are sort of registering ownership. To them, it's just like, hey, is this legitimate? Is the art protected? is it the kind of investment that I want to be partaking in? And we need to make sure that our language appeals to them, because it's, again, our responsibility to get people into blockchain that way. So you'll see our landing page talks about the art. It talks about the benefits to the consumer more than just like, hey, we're a blockchain company. We're a blockchain company. We're not yelling that in people's faces, but we also think that what we're doing is fundamentally important. So like when we have conversations with people like you, we want to make sure people know, like, hey, it's cool that these are some of the first legal Warhols on Ethereum, right? Like that matters. That's a little bit of a historic moment. And we care about the other sort of interpretations or the allowances that blockchain gives when it comes to utility. And like, we want to talk about that too, but we also need to be sure not to, I just saw that ape when I was in Italy, actually, a couple of weeks ago. But we want to make sure that we get the right people in on both sides, and that we end up in this place where everyone looks at what we're doing and they say, that's the way I want to own something, right? It's not the legacy way. It's not like necessarily the hardcore Web3 way. It's like, it's the Freeport way. And that's what we're trying to develop here. It's hard to do. It's hard to make sure you speak to both people, but it's an honest discussion with both sides, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was effective. That's one of the things that really jumped out to me when I started looking at what you guys are doing is the voice. And one of my questions was, who is their target audience? Because it was, and I think not a lot of companies would have taken the approach that you did, because it could almost seem off-putting or alienating to one side or the other, but you did it in such a way that it was authentic, it was with purpose. And I think it was a little bit of a gamble, but I think it paid off. I think it's effective the way that it works. And I'll let other people that are more keen to marketing, methodologies kind of dig into the psychology of that. But props to you guys for doing that.
Yeah, no, thanks. We thought a lot about it. We're going to keep iterating on the voice, because like, we're going to keep developing this space, right? We do. It's funny because like, sometimes we want to lightly rib NFTs and be like, oh, like NFTs, they're not backed by anything. But on the other hand, we're like, we buy NFTs, our team, like we love them.
Right.
So
no, exactly. Yeah.
So we have to kind of play that middle ground. We don't want to offend anyone in the NFT space, but we do have to draw a distinction about why we're different from the things that may have just dropped 98% overnight, right? Like, so we do need to somehow tell that story. And we're trying to balance those two things, but we're still throwing, as you see by the memes here, like a continuous bone to that community, because that's where, like, that's what we want to get to. Those are the people that we want to draw in, that we think are going to be really good stewards of the experience on Freeport once we get everything sort of humming.
Yeah. And speaking of that, you have the messaging there on what you are. What has been the reaction from the trad art world and from what you would say were traditionally Web3 natives?
It's really mixed. It's funny. Like, so some people in the trad art world look at, they can be a little bit of lemmings, right? So they can see that other people are doing cool things and disrupting the art world and say, okay, oh shit, I need to go take part in that. Like, how do I take part? And that's like, super valuable for us, those people. But there are other people that are like, no, like, we want to sort of hold our noses up. There's a reason that I want to just own this thing myself and not own it alongside other people. And like, don't start fractionalizing things. Don't start bringing the like populist, like democratization element. Like, we like the sort of elite world that we play in. And then in the crypto space, we've seen both too. We've seen people that have crushed it in the NFT world and have said, all right, well, like, what's the next thing? Like, if you look at Cosimo de Medici on Twitter, a lot of his most recent posts are like, hey guys, like, we're in a little bit of a bear market right now. We need to look at traditional art, or we need to be merging the worlds of traditional art with the NFT world, because there's a lot to gain from that, right? So there are some people that have that sort of level of maturity, I guess, to look at NFTs, love them, continue engaging, but also to say, hey, there's another thing out here that's the real sort of fine art world. But there are also other people in the NFT space that are like, nah, not for me. Like, only give me the thing that has a digital provenance, that was created on chain, where I know there are only 10,000 of them. I know who's owned it before me. And I totally respect that, right? If that's the kind of collector people are, then like, keep collecting in that way. And I think that's totally cool. I would say, like, give what we're up to a chance, because I think it's going to be really fun and different. But we've had that broad spectrum of responses. We've also had people that are just like, this is the best thing I've ever heard of. How can I work for you? Which has been fun too. So yeah, we're navigating that area, and we're hopeful that, like, we've gotten. I will say this: like, we've got early access launch today, and we have a significant number of purchases coming in. And by the looks of it, it's people from both sides of the equation, which is really cool to see.
That's dope. I did notice as well when I looked at some of your galleries here that were just, and I don't know if this is just examples that you guys have of things that people have already built, but I see Bruce the Goose down here along with some other people with ENS names, right? So people from the community are already hopping in and participating. You talk about the launch day for early access. Did that just launch? What's the timeline? What exactly? How can people participate if they are interested?
So it launched at 10 a.m. Eastern this morning. was our early access. So public access is on Wednesday.
Okay.
Early access is for like specific VIP communities. We can drop an early access code for this community actually on this call. I think that's okay. I'm like looking over at my team. So people can get involved. But yeah, we've already we've got some communities that are engaged that have started purchasing this morning. Which is really, really awesome to see before we've even gone public. We also have, not to like steal the thunder of the next few days, but very likely a lot of press is going to be coming out in the next few days. It's funny. The first time we went out and we announced that we had SEC approval, we got a CoinDesk article written and a few other very crypto oriented, like we were on the block in Milk Road and like some of those, the usual suspects there. What we're looking at this time is likely more like, I don't want to put the cart before the horse because it hasn't been confirmed yet, but like the bigger, more legacy names in the PR and news world, right? And that's going to be happening on Wednesday. So that's when we expect there to be a really, really massive influx, let's just say. But if people want to get involved now, they can use we have an early access code. It's 0x, OX, and then Marilyn, as in Marilyn Monroe, who you see on the screen right now. And people should be able to go in and make a purchase of any of this, like sign up and make a purchase of any of the offerings today using that access code.
Dope. Thank you so much for sharing that. That 0x Maryland, is that a capital M or lowercase?
Lowercase
Underscore between or just 0x Maryland?
No, just 0x Maryland.
Very cool. 0x West will be happy that you leverage his naming methodology as well. He's one of our ardent community members who actually is quite active in the Trad Art world. So
we're trying to merge these worlds wherever we can, even if it's just through access codes.
It's funny because he has that, and that's what we know him as. And he also has his Trad traditional Twitter profile as well, which he doesn't use quite as much, but he has a legacy history here in entertainment and hosting shows on GBH and different places. So I understand it. The shares here, do they remain? So these are static fractionalized prices, or will the market demand change them?
Yeah. So right now at the time of launch, they're static prices. There's a minimum of 10 shares. The maximum is 10% of the entire offering. So there's 10,000 shares in each, to be clear. We thought that would be a nice familiar number for people. And it also breaks out into a nice sort of easily investable amount. But yeah, they're static prices until we sell out the first offering. I don't want to say the word ICO because it gets you in trouble, but it's kind of like when you have an ICO, right? So like Marilyn is almost her own coin offering. Once we sell out Marilyn, then we close that offering. And then we issue the shares, right? And then people can the shares are really tokenized. And then people will have those tokens. And then we'll launch a secondary market a few months after. We've already signed these contracts again, but we will have to build it out, right? So there are these legitimate players that are alternative trading systems and broker dealers that we have to work with in order to build that like legally. But that will be happening. So yeah, the process is basically static price right now, but for that secondary market, people will be able to have bids and asks and things like that.
Is there any qualifier that people need to do in order to be in line with the SEC regulations and whatnot, besides being obviously able to participate, being of a certain age, et cetera, residency?
No. So, I mean, you do have to input, there is some KYC. It's the lightest possible KYC. I would equate it to like the Yuga Labs KYC for other side deeds, right? So if you're in the US, it's just a social security number. It's an address and social security number, but you don't need like a passport or a driver's license or anything like that. If you're international, you do need to have those things just because like KYC AML is difficult if you don't know someone's identity, if they're coming in internationally. But in the US, it's like just social. It's relatively straightforward. But we do have that requirement. It's a legal requirement. We made it as lightweight as possible. People will see that when they go through the purchase flow. We don't want to be intrusive, but we have to follow the rules.
Nor believe me, I'm using an animated avatar here. Obviously, I go by my moniker. Even in my city, people know me as Nightmare. That being said, typically I would recoil at the thought of advocating for KYC, but in this case, I actually like it, knowing that you are on the front lines working with the SEC and developing their relationship and their understanding of how crypto and NFTs and obviously these aren't in the traditional sense NFTs, but tokenized assets, and in the way that you're tokenizing and fractionalizing, IRL goods, you're on the front lines there. So having AML and KYC buttoned up and really having a strong showing on, how this can be done in a really efficient way, I think is going to, benefit everyone in this space. So I think that I would be for it. I might be for it. And I don't often say that, but I think I would for this one.
I appreciate that. As soon as we can use some kind of ZK proof for identity confirmation, so people don't have to deal with that nonsense, we absolutely will. The SEC isn't quite there yet on those, but I hope soon. I really hope soon.
Wow, this is super dope. I'm excited about you guys' launch and excited to see some of the additional PR if this thing just kind of takes off when that hits. Sounds like it might. Any growth plans beyond this current model? Obviously, you have, you're acquiring art. You talked about possibly being a white label, not a white label, but a solution for other companies trying to come in and fractionalize some of their goods, or other people with art assets. Do you have grander plans in scope that hey, if we achieve X, this is the next thing that we're aspiring to do?
Yeah, 100%. So Freeport it's purposefully named, right? So like Freeports have historically been these places where super wealthy people hide things that are worth a lot of money, and they trade them back and forth because they're tax advantaged areas. So like there are Freeports in like Singapore. There's actually one in Delaware, and frankly, we might be using one to store our own artwork to give the best possible tax advantage to our customers. To be clear, but they've historically been these places where like the artwork or these like super high value goods that normal people can't access have just been stored away, right? Our goal is to sort of pull those things out into the light, create a virtual representation of them, and let anyone invest in cool, rare stuff that they normally wouldn't be able to access, and then bring it to life for them so that they can show it to other people, so that they can just have their sort of massive collection of tokenized assets all live in one place. And art is phase one, but you could imagine that expanding into things like other collectibles or real estate. There's probably some really cool things you can do with metaverses and real estate, and having tokenized assets be visualized in that way. And then eventually, if you want like my personal kind of nerdy long-term goal, and my team's probably looking at me saying, no, don't say anything about that. But like, I like the idea of there being, I don't know if you're familiar with the Svalbard seed vaults, which is up in Norway, which like they have all these seeds for plants in case something terrible happens like on planet Earth, like a nuclear catastrophe, so that they can like, recreate life. I want to just have this massive sort of compound that's full of like all the coolest shit you could ever imagine, and let people who are investors just come hang out in it, right? It's like going to the most epic museum of all time, but actually owning a piece of the things that exist, or owning shares in a piece of the things that exist in that museum. I think that'd be pretty dope. That's a few years out. That's, to be clear, not at launch, but I'd like to see that future.
That is fire. We actually talked about, I'm trying to remember the name of the collector, but there was some collector that decided he was going to acquire all these amazing pieces, really eccentric taste, and just build out like a fortress that he would go visit. And at some point people were asking them, hey, can we spend the night there? Can we throw an event there, just because it was such an awe-inspiring place. So thinking of the different things that you're into and what you think would be fire, I can only imagine what this place would be. So great great description of what you guys are doing, how you're aspiring to do it in such a way that you're thinking the long game here, and not just what can happen in this particular launch. And obviously, I think this is meaningful. Personally, I think this is meaningful to the space, and seeing how the SEC can come into the fold and be a positive force and a positive environment for different things beyond what we're seeing here and traditionally, and how these things are taken to market. I know we're up against the hour, but if you have a few more minutes, I would love to run by you rapid fire some questions that we got from the community. I've gotten a ton actually DM'd to me, and I'm gonna try to get through all the ones that aren't trolling. Maybe slip one in there for you, but
I
we
can
do have
troll
some
away.
questions. This is now. Most of these are pretty straightforward. Any partnerships you guys are working with on deck with other organizations to bring visibility to your platform?
So we are we're super open to that. First, I'll say. Second, we're looking. So one of the things we got approval for, it will not be live at launch. I got to be really clear about that. But one thing we got approval for is actually lending. So we submitted in the offering circular the desire to basically be able to, like, let's say you've got the hot pink Maryland, $10,000 worth, stake it, take out a loan in USDC instantly against it. And we can do that pretty safely because we know where the physical asset is. We're taking care of it. It's a pretty low risk like lending endeavor. So we are looking at partners that can help out with that. We're chatting with like Goldfinch and a few other folks. But what I'd love to do is to sort of bring this to different communities in the NFT space, frankly. Like, we've got this awesome gallery, right? We have the ability for people to connect their wallets and create these other galleries. There's a lot of room for that kind of partnership. And frankly, we've just been like a tight, agile team. Like you saw before, we've got the 5 people and then 3 engineers. They're like 8 of us total doing a lot, right? But if people have ideas for partnerships or are part of communities that might want to take part here, we're super down for that. And we're also very down to like support other people in the Web3 space and to sort of like, use our marketing capabilities to do that as well. So if people have ideas, please reach out.
Definitely will. I happen to know an organization that has one of the most esteemed collection of historic NFTs in the history of Web3, along with 2,800 parcels of metaverse land. So we may be having a conversation.
I've seen
another
your
question.
Stats.
Yeah,
awesome.
another conversation. What other art pieces do you have on deck? Any other artists or creators you could give us a hint to?
So we actually have a few other Warhols that we decided not to put in this one, but that we could pull into the next collections. We like Warhol right now just because the pieces, again, are sort of like highly liquid. There's a lot of demand for them over time and people recognize him as an artist. But we also are like I said before, we've got folks. So we'll likely have a few more collections that are like contemporary art or pop art, I guess is what I'll hint at. But we also have a lot of inbound. Like I said before, we had people with a Banksy that wanted us to fractionalize things. We had, the Playboy discussions, and there were 1 or 2 others. I can't like promise anything right now. So I guess like a lot is to come on that front, but you can expect a lot more art that's kind of similar to what you're seeing here in the near term.
Okay. Right on cue, there's a lot of calls for Basquiat. So certainly there's demand here and people excited to see what you would have coming.
I own a piece of a Basquiat. Let me just say that.
Beautiful.
On a different platform. Yeah.
Also tokenized or?
No, not tokenized. So I probably shouldn't talk about competitors, but whatever. I'll just be honest. There's another platform called Masterworks that does this, but off chain, right? So like they're just super legacy. But they've gotten good pieces of art and they've actually gotten like really, really solid returns on a lot of their pieces of art. And my first fractional art ownership purchase was a Basquiat. So I'm willing to call out our competitor and announce that.
Yeah, no, it's definitely good to understand the differentiation there. And shout out to Masterworks. We've had some conversations with them as well on some different initiatives. A good question here. What keeps you up at night as a founder and creator in this space?
Oh man, the market, like the macro market right now, it's really hard we started the company 13 or 14 months ago, right? And back then things were still humming along pretty well, like pre FTX, obviously. And we had expectations for just like how crazy this would blow up. Having a market be in the sort of current state that it's in has just like introduced doubt, I guess you could say. So when you think about staying up at night, like that part's tough. Now, when you have days like we're having today and you see sort of, the initial investments rolling in and you've got like, an interview with Forbes coming up in 30 minutes, like it feels much better, I guess you could say. But there's uncertainty, right? That goes along with being in this kind of environment. There's also regulatory uncertainty. I think we've done a lot to sort of push that uncertainty away because we went the SEC route. So we don't have to stay up quite as much as some other folks who might be in legal gray areas. So that part is nice. But one of the things we brought up before too is the communities that we want to be part of, right? So like we want the Web3 community to engage with us. And we want to not be seen as like, kind of like you're doing the KYC thing and like the SEC thing. So to some degree, we're concerned about turning the people in Web3 and just sort of avid supporters and kind of understanding what we're up to. So those would be my most honest answers.
No, I can definitely see that, and I appreciate that. I think this next question, there's a couple of questions I think that are similar, so I'll throw them both out at the same time. One person asked, will there be any visual or symbolic piece of artwork that goes along with the fractionalization? And then another person asked if the different pieces could have a different aesthetic if you own more than one. So I think what they're saying is, say you literally made this a mosaic and each person had an individual separate type of visualization that was unique to that specific piece, if that's something that's possible.
Yeah.
And I think the other person's almost referencing an artist, Pac. I don't know if you're familiar with Pac, but he had a project Merge where depending on how many pieces you had, right, they could grow in size.
Yeah. So we thought about this too, like, hey, should we make it more opaque, more transparent, like if people don't own that many shares, and like more opaque if they own more shares on the platform? At the end of the day, we didn't want to get too complicated with that to start. And also, I will say, we are displaying the Warhols on the platform because people can buy them there, buy and sell them there. The imagery we can't like recreate in other formats. It's really just like, hey, you're buying and selling it here, or you're viewing the asset that you're a partial owner of.
Right.
So when we have other artists in the future that are like, in the public domain, as an example, like, I don't know if we had like any kind of an epic old Picasso might actually still be copywritten. But anyways, like once assets are out of the public domain, then we can do a lot more fun things with the actual imagery itself. So yes, we're absolutely like of the mindset that we can have a lot of fun with this. But to start, we're just going to let anyone who owns, even if they purchase like the minimum number of shares today, let's just say, they'll be able to hang the artwork in their gallery for now without any adjustments. But if people have ideas, we're also open. Like, people should feel free to reach out to us on Twitter, or like just hello@freeport.app if they've got interesting ideas. We're very open to conversations.
Very cool. And maybe if you have some artists that engage with you guys and you build something from the ground up, who knows? But I actually,
yes.
that was a very intriguing question. I'm glad they threw that out there. Someone asked, when a piece goes to market, who makes a decision if you accept the offer? Is that your analyst, or is that a vote by the holders?
So right now it's us and our advisors, or people who are deep in the art space who've been doing this for many, many years. We want to democratize over time. But as you can imagine, when you're a startup and there are a lot of decisions that have to be, it's kind of like, how everyone creates tokens, or they create a DAO with NFTs, and it's pretty centralized for the first like 2 to 4 years. And everyone's like, hey, after 4 years, then we'll be purely decentralized. Like, no one is really decentralized except like maybe Uniswap or something like that, right? We're going to start like that because we need to make this thing work, and like it has to be relatively controlled. And the SEC probably doesn't want us saying, hey, we're just going to have our like people vote on what to do with the artwork at this point in the future. So we have to keep it contained. We'll likely in the future introduce more like democratic policy. And then like my long-term vision, again, like I'd love to have these tokens be tradable on Uniswap and on SushiSwap, and to have on-chain governance to make decisions like this where relevant. But again, we're taking the sort of responsible steps that we can at this point in time to get there. So at the start, it's going to be up to us and our advisors. And you can bet that we're going to take every possible action to sell to the most benefit of all of our users, right? That's just a much better world for us when we're making money for our users.
Yeah, there was another question in here actually kind of touching on that, right? And what they had said, and I think there's some nuance to it, but their sentiment was why make a purchase this way instead of with a DAO? And I think, obviously not everyone is a participant in a DAO that's active, let alone active buying assets in IRL. But there's also some other parts of the dynamic that you guys, you have there, and you just alluded to some of that. So
I love DAOs, but especially for things that are digitally provenance. This is kind of the term that I use, right? So when you have a physical asset, that physical asset needs to live somewhere. You as part of the DAO need to trust that the people who are managing that digital asset aren't like schmucks or assholes or like snake oil salesmen. When you've got a DAO and it's sort of, you're coming to group consensus, then you have to figure out like who's going to manage the relationship with like the physical location and the insurance on the assets. And there is that distinction between the physical world and the digital world that a DAO can't really adapt for that easily right now, right? DAOs are going to get better and better over time and more efficient at solving these problems. But right now, you need a group that's really capable of interacting with the physical world as well as the digital one. Again, I hope that changes over time, but I don't think a DAO is going to give you the best, frankly, user experience or customer experience, because there will be so many things that it can't do really naturally because it's such a digital first organization and we're dealing with high value physical assets.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. And, obviously not everyone is a participant in a DAO, right? And some people may still want to get involved in owning a piece of some of these artworks, especially with the unique reach that you guys have with some of your connections. I know you have the Forbes interview coming up, so I'll make this your last one, and I like this one. And they preface this by saying, "Glad to see he's one of us." And this is a 3-part question, so I'll throw it out to you all at once. What are some of the favorite NFTs you own? What are some of the more eccentric and embarrassing things in your wallet? And what is a grail NFT that you would love to acquire?
Okay. All right. So let's talk. What I've got right now is not as impressive as it should be. I've got like a Moonbird oddity. I think the thing I'm most proud of is I invested in Illuvium like super early on. So I have a Gangsta Squiz emoji from Illuvium. That's like, I think only like 50 other people have that back in the OG day. The most embarrassing thing I think I have 50 degenerates, which people may or may not be familiar with, but they're like people holding dildos and like psychedelic mushrooms and like all kinds of stuff, like going to the club. I minted 50 of them at launch, and I think those are still in my wallet. If people look at my wallet history, I just got like a BEB score, which is this thing on Farcaster that's like cred on chain, and it's pretty deep. I'll just say that. As far as what I aspire to own in the future, I mentioned Fidenzas before. I just think they're like gorgeous. I think they're going to be absolutely timeless. And like, I'd really like to own a Fidenza, and then just like a CryptoPunk. I want a CryptoPunk.
I hear you. That's one of my goals as well. So kindred spirits in that regard. You'll have to rotate your Pepe money into that, Colin, and see if you can make it happen. So
I wish I had that Pepe money.
Yeah, well, there was Turbo Toad too, so there was other opportunity there. Yeah. And shout out to all the people in Rhett, who's a big part of the whale community, for his success with that project. But congratulations to you on your launch today for the pre-sale, and everyone that was whitelisted. And thank you so much for giving the opportunity for people that are tuning in today to hop in with 0x Maryland if they want to participate. And exciting times ahead. I'm eager to see when the press hits and it's public on Wednesday how you guys take off and what the reception is.
Yeah, I'm excited too. Really appreciate you having me on here. Again, if people have questions, especially the partnership thing, like we're very down to have those discussions. So please reach out. But I appreciate you having me on. This has been honestly, this is the exact kind of conversation I love having. So glad to be here.
Awesome, Colin. Well, best of luck in the rest of your day, and can't wait to see you guys just crush it after launch. Have a good one.
Awesome. Thanks, Nightmare.